Most people misunderstand Machiavelli because they only read what he was willing to say in public. They quote The Prince as if it were a complete confession. It was not. It was a mask, a controlled release, a book written for rulers who already suspected the truth but needed permission to act on it. The real lessons were never meant for the crowd. They were given quietly, in letters, in private conversations, to men he trusted enough to be honest with, to friends who could hear the truth without flinching, to allies who would not confuse reality with morality. And the first thing Machiavelli made painfully clear to them was this: if you are trying to be understood, you have already lost power. You have been trained to explain yourself, to clarify intentions, to justify decisions, to seek agreement as proof of legitimacy. This instinct feels human, it feels fair, it feels civil. It is also a weakness. Machiavelli observed that explanation lowers your position in any hierarchy. The mind that explains places itself beneath the mind that judges. When you explain, you concede authority. You invite evaluation. You hand the other person the role of arbiter. You put yourself on trial without realizing it. Power never argues its existence. It assumes it. This is not philosophy. This is biology. In every social species, from wolves to primates to humans, dominance is not negotiated verbally. It is asserted through posture, timing, silence, and restraint. The animal that explains itself is signaling uncertainty. The animal that waits is signaling control. Humans pretend we evolved beyond this. We did not. We merely learned to disguise it with language. Machiavelli saw through the disguise. He understood that most social conflict is not about truth or fairness. It is about positioning, about who sets the frame and who reacts inside it, about who defines reality and who adapts to it. When you rush to be understood, you reveal anxiety. Anxiety is information, and information is leverage. This is why powerful people speak less, not more, not because they lack thoughts, but because they understand the psychological pressure of absence. Silence forces projection. It forces others to fill the gap with their own fears, assumptions, and narratives. And those narratives rarely favor the person doing the guessing. You think silence makes you invisible. In reality, it makes you unavoidable. Machiavelli warned his friends about this early because he knew the temptation would be strong. The temptation to correct misunderstandings, the temptation to defend reputation, the temptation to respond emotionally when challenged. He told them not to. Because the moment you defend, you validate the attack. The moment you explain, you accept the premise that you owe clarity. And the moment you accept that premise, you surrender the higher ground. The weak crave resolution. The strong tolerate tension. This is where most people fail. They confuse discomfort with danger. They believe unanswered accusations are fatal. They believe silence is admission. They believe that if they do not speak, they will be misinterpreted. Machiavelli understood something colder. Misinterpretation is not always a threat. Sometimes it is a filter. Sometimes it removes those who were never meant to stand close to you. Sometimes it reveals who is watching you for weakness and who is watching you for leadership. Predators do not explain themselves to prey. Leaders do not justify themselves to followers. Authority is not built by consensus. It is built by inevitability. This is unedited Machiavelli, not the classroom version, not the sanitized version. This is the advice he gave when no one was recording, when no reputation needed protecting, when only effectiveness mattered. And this was only the first fracture he wanted to create in his friends' thinking. Because once you stop needing to be understood, something else happens, something far more dangerous. People start adjusting themselves around you. Once Machiavelli stripped away the need to be understood, he moved his friends toward a far more uncomfortable truth, one that most people sense but refuse to articulate. He told them that affection is unstable, but dependence is reliable. This is where modern minds resist. You have been taught to seek loyalty through kindness, fairness, shared values. You have been told that people follow those they admire, that respect is earned through moral consistency, that goodwill is a currency you can store. Machiavelli watched this belief collapse repeatedly. He observed that affection evaporates under pressure. It bends when incentives shift. It disappears the moment following you becomes costly. Love is emotional. Emotion is volatile, and volatility cannot be the foundation of power. Dependence is different. Dependence rewires behavior. It changes incentives. It anchors fear beneath surface loyalty. When someone needs you for access, protection, opportunity, or identity, their rational mind begins to defend you before their emotions ever get involved. They justify you. They excuse you. They align with you not because they feel loyal, but because disloyalty becomes dangerous. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Human beings do not attach most strongly to those who make them feel good. They attach to those who make them feel necessary, seen, or exposed. They bond through asymmetry, through imbalance, through the quiet awareness that separation would be costly. Machiavelli warned his friends never to equalize relationships once authority had been established. Equality feels virtuous. It feels generous. It also dissolves hierarchy, and hierarchy, whether acknowledged or not, is the skeleton of every durable relationship. The mind seeks order. When order disappears, anxiety replaces it. People then attempt to dominate, sabotage, or escape. This is why friendships collapse when boundaries blur. This is why leaders fall when they try to be liked. This is why power shared too freely is eventually taken. He advised them to give benefits, but never independence, to offer protection, but never remove the need for it, to reward loyalty, but never erase leverage. Most people hear this and recoil. They imagine tyranny, they imagine manipulation, they imagine isolation. They miss the point. Machiavelli was not teaching them how to rule violently. He was teaching them how to rule invisibly, how to become central without appearing forceful, how to make themselves structurally important rather than emotionally pleasing. This is how institutions survive. This is how empires last longer than their founders. This is how certain individuals remain untouchable even when disliked. Because people will tolerate what they resent if losing it feels worse. Around halfway through this realization, there is something you need to decide. If you are listening to this and feeling resistance, that resistance is information. It tells you where your conditioning ends and where reality begins. If you intend to keep going deeper into this territory, signal it now. Like this video and subscribe, not as support, as alignment. Those who hesitate self-select out. Machiavelli understood another brutal mechanism beneath dependence. Gratitude decays faster than obligation. The human brain normalizes advantage quickly. What once felt like a gift soon feels like baseline. What once inspired loyalty soon feels deserved. Gratitude fades, expectation remains. This is why generosity without structure breeds contempt. The recipient adapts, then resents the giver for holding power they now feel entitled to. They begin to look for ways to rebalance the equation, often through betrayal. Machiavelli warned his friends never to confuse being needed with being loved. Love invites challenge. Need enforces restraint. He also warned them never to reveal how necessary others were to them. Dependence must always feel one-directional. The moment someone believes you need them as much as they need you, the balance breaks. Negotiation replaces obedience. Demands replace loyalty. You see this everywhere once you know how to look, in workplaces, in families, in friendships, in alliances that collapse the moment leverage equalizes. This advice was never meant for the sentimental. It was meant for those who intended to remain standing when conditions turned hostile. And Machiavelli knew they would, because the next truth he gave them was colder still. It had nothing to do with affection or dependence. It had to do with fear. Machiavelli understood fear in a way few ever dare to articulate. Not as terror, not as panic, but as a stabilizing force. Near the beginning of this next lesson, before we go any further, I want you to mark yourself. Comment below with a single word: control. Do not explain it, do not decorate it, just write it. Those who understand why will already know what they're signaling. Now listen carefully. Machiavelli told his closest friends that fear, when properly calibrated, is more loyal than love and more predictable than respect. This statement has been softened, misquoted, and moralized for centuries, but what he meant was far more precise. Fear narrows perception. It simplifies decision-making. It pushes the mind toward caution, restraint, and pattern following. A fearful person does not innovate against you. They do not improvise rebellion. They conserve energy. They avoid risk. They comply quietly. Love does the opposite. Love expands. It emboldens. It encourages familiarity. And familiarity breeds entitlement. Entitlement breeds challenge. Fear, when clean and impersonal, freezes hierarchy in place. But Machiavelli was not advising cruelty. He despised uncontrolled violence because it creates chaos, not order. Chaos invites retaliation. Retaliation invites collapse. What he taught instead was psychological fear, the fear of consequences that are consistent, inevitable, and emotionally detached. The human nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to pattern. When consequences are unpredictable, people panic. When they are predictable, people adapt. They modify behavior. They self-correct. They police themselves so you do not have to. This is the kind of fear that maintains power without effort. Machiavelli warned his friends never to threaten excessively. Threats reveal intent. They expose insecurity. They force you to act or lose credibility. The strong do not threaten. They allow others to infer. Inference is more powerful than instruction. When people imagine consequences, they customize them to their own fears. Their imagination will always be harsher than anything you could say aloud. Silence, paired with a known capacity for action, does more psychological damage than explicit warnings ever could. This is why the calm man in the room is always more dangerous than the loud one. Machiavelli also understood something uncomfortable about mercy. Mercy feels noble, it feels human, but unstructured mercy teaches people that boundaries are flexible, that consequences are negotiable, that rules bend under pressure. Mercy must be rare, and when it is given, it must feel costly. If forgiveness is easy, violation becomes cheap. This is not pessimism, it is behavioral conditioning. The mind learns through association. Pain teaches faster than pleasure because it threatens survival. This is not culture, this is evolution. Your ancestors did not survive by loving danger, they survived by avoiding it. Machiavelli's friends were warned to never appear emotionally invested in punishment. Punishment should feel procedural, mechanical, almost boring. Emotion signals loss of control. Detachment signals inevitability. People do not fear anger, they fear systems that do not care. And here is the inversion most people miss. Fear does not repel everyone. It repels the reckless. It repels the entitled. It repels those who test limits for entertainment. What remains are those who value stability, structure, and predictability. Fear filters your environment. Machiavelli knew that power is not about dominating everyone. It is about selecting who remains close. Fear quietly performs that selection for you. But he did not stop there, because fear alone creates distance, and distance without access creates stagnation. A ruler surrounded only by fear eventually loses information. They become blind. So, Machiavelli gave his friends a final warning within this lesson. Never let fear be the only emotion people associate with you. There must also be reward. Not frequent, not emotional, but strategic. Because the next layer of control is not fear, it is hope. And that is where most people completely lose their footing. Hope is more dangerous than fear because it feels benevolent while doing the same work. Machiavelli told his friends that fear stabilizes behavior, but hope directs it. Fear stops people from crossing lines. Hope pulls them forward along the path you choose. Together, they create motion without resistance. But hope must never be guaranteed. The human brain is addicted to variable reward. Predictable reward becomes invisible. Guaranteed reward becomes entitlement. But uncertain reward, dangled just out of reach, produces obsession. Attention narrows, effort increases, loyalty deepens. This is not manipulation by chance. This is neurological capture. Machiavelli understood that people do not work hardest for what they have. They work hardest for what they almost have. So he warned his friends never to fully satisfy ambition in others. Fulfillment ends movement. Anticipation sustains it. You offer just enough progress to keep them invested, just enough recognition to keep them hopeful, just enough proximity to make withdrawal painful. The mistake most leaders make is closure. They resolve relationships too cleanly. They define roles too clearly. They eliminate ambiguity in the name of honesty. Machiavelli knew ambiguity is leverage. When people are unsure where they stand with you, they monitor themselves. They adjust tone. They overperform. They become hyper-aware of your reactions. You no longer need to command. Their nervous system does the work for you. Clarity is comforting. Comfort breeds laziness. Hope thrives in uncertainty. He also warned his friends never to reveal the full path upward. If people can see the top clearly, they calculate, they negotiate, they delay. But if the path is partially obscured, they keep moving, step by step, adjustment by adjustment, always believing the next effort might be the one that secures position. This is how courts functioned. This is how modern organizations function. This is how influence networks survive. People remain loyal not because they are content, but because they believe progress is still possible. And here is the cruel paradox Machiavelli revealed. The more someone invests in chasing your approval, the more they rationalize your authority. Their own effort becomes proof of your worth. They defend you to preserve their self-image. To admit you were unworthy would mean admitting their devotion was misplaced. So they double down. This is why people cling hardest to systems that exploit them subtly. Leaving would require psychological collapse. Staying preserves coherence. Machiavelli did not invent this. He simply observed it without sentiment. He also issued a warning his friends struggled to accept. Never offer hope to everyone. Hope must be selective. Scarcity creates value. If everyone believes advancement is possible, advancement loses meaning. Competition dissolves. Discipline erodes. Hope must feel earned, but never secured. This creates internal rivalry that never points upward at you. It points sideways. While they compete with each other, you remain the fixed point, the constant, the judge. This is how you remain untouched by conflict while standing at its center. But Machiavelli was not reckless. He understood the danger here. If hope becomes illusion without occasional confirmation, it turns to resentment. Resentment seeks a target, and eventually it looks up. So he gave his friends one final constraint. You must reward just enough to maintain belief. Not fairness, not generosity, belief. The reward does not need to be proportional. It needs to be symbolic, a sign that movement is possible, that alignment is noticed, that obedience has memory. This keeps the system alive. By now, you should feel the pressure shifting. The world you were taught to navigate is collapsing. In its place is a colder map, a more accurate one. But Machiavelli saved his most personal advice for last. It was not about controlling others. It was about protecting yourself from what control does to you. Machiavelli's final advice to his closest friends was never written for rulers alone. It was written for survivors. He warned them that power does not only corrupt morality, it corrodes perception. The greatest danger is not rebellion, it is self-deception. When people begin to fear you, depend on you, hope through you, and orient themselves around you, something subtle happens inside your mind. You start mistaking obedience for truth. You start confusing silence with agreement. You start believing the image others project onto you. This is how rulers fall without being touched. Machiavelli told his friends to never trust the emotional atmosphere they created. Control distorts feedback. The higher you rise, the more filtered reality becomes. Praise becomes strategic. Agreement becomes defensive. Laughter becomes calculated. So he instructed them to build one protected space where power was suspended. Not publicly, never publicly, privately. He told them to keep a small inner circle of individuals who gained nothing from flattering them and lost nothing from disagreeing. Not equals, not friends in the sentimental sense, observers, realists, people who could speak without fear because they were already insulated from consequence. This was not for comfort, it was for calibration. Without this, power becomes a hallucination. You begin to overestimate loyalty. You misjudge threat. You confuse stillness for stability. And then collapse comes suddenly, not because it was unpredictable, but because you blinded yourself to it. Machiavelli was ruthless with this rule. He warned that even one indulgent lie tolerated for emotional relief weakens judgment. You do not need honesty often, you need it precisely. And here was his coldest inversion. Never reveal your true doubts to those who depend on you. Your uncertainty destabilizes. Your hesitation invites testing. Your introspection, when witnessed, becomes opportunity. Doubt must be processed away from the structure you command. Authority is not about being correct at all times. It is about appearing resolved while you correct privately. This is how systems endure. Machiavelli also warned them about isolation, not physical isolation, but psychological isolation. The moment you begin to enjoy being feared, you are compromised. The moment dominance becomes identity rather than function, you lose flexibility. Power is a tool, not a personality. He told them to rotate masks consciously, to never believe their own performance, to remember that control is a position you occupy, not a truth about who you are. Those who forget this grow rigid. Rigidity shatters. And then he gave them the final safeguard. Always maintain the ability to walk away, not emotionally, structurally. The person who can leave without collapse is the person who cannot be trapped. Detachment is not weakness, it is the ultimate leverage. If you need the throne to exist, you will eventually destroy yourself defending it. If you can abandon it, you will never need to fight for it. This is the paradox Machiavelli left his friends with. The highest form of power is not control over others, it is control over your own attachment to control. Everything you have heard up to now was not meant to make you cruel, it was meant to make you accurate, clear-eyed, unromantic about human nature. Dangerous only in the sense that reality is dangerous when you stop lying about it. Most people will never want this knowledge. They will sense its weight and retreat back into comforting myths. That is expected. This is not for them. If you are still here, you already know why. This channel is not entertainment, it is filtration. Subscribing is not following content, it is stepping inside a frame where power is studied without illusion and spoken without apology. Those who belong will choose it.